Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Yes, indeed, we are here today in Total War Warhammer 3 with High Queen Khalida and the start of a new campaign. Before we head on to the campaign map and get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, I thought we'd just take a quick look at the things that High Queen Khalida brings us by default. So, as a faction, we get plus 10 diplomatic relations with everyone, plus 15% research rate, bonus control, which will be nice, and extra ammunition for all of our armies, tied into Khalida being famed for her archer legions. However, what's really special about Khalida is the Lord effects, the things that she personally brings to her army. The minus 50% casualties from attrition is really nice. It'll allow us to get around the map without risking ourselves too much. The minus corruption in local province is, hit or miss, don't mind that too much. But the real thing, the really important thing, is the enables poison attacks. Because skeletons are fairly weak in the early game. And skeleton archers, skeletons, having poison attacks will help to minimize the differential between us and some of the harder hitting enemies that we are likely to run into. That's all I really wanted to cover, so I'll see you all on the campaign map.
Those that stand before the Queen of Libara shall fall.
Indeed they shall. Now, how do the Tomb Kings play? The Court of Libaris needs to seek out the 8 Books of Nagash by occupying settlements and defeating the characters that harbour them to gain extra power. So that's going to be our main objective. However, along the way, there are a couple of things that the Tomb Kings do very differently to other factions. And the first one of those is this one here. Construct military buildings to recruit units without financial cost or upkeep via their Day of Awakening, increasing recruitment capacities with each building constructed. What that means is that we don't pay any upkeep. We don't have to worry about recruitment costs because we're raising the debt. However, unlike other factions, we can't just say, I have enough money for 4 of these elite units, I want 4 of these elite units. We can only recruit as many as we have buildings, and that means that getting to high tech requires us to have a relatively large empire or duplicate buildings within the same area to increase the effect of that Day of Awakening passive. Now, something else that we can do is use canopic jars to awaken regiments of renown in the mortuary cult or craft powerful items. This is in conjunction with money and resources that we get through trade or from conquering settlements. And this will be a way that we make armor weaponry for Khalida throughout the campaign and, as said, get access to the regiments of renown. So those are just a couple of things that we're going to be watching out for. We're going to be coming in here to this Legions of Legend weapons armor, the mortuary cult screen, and seeing what we can make to empower ourselves during our campaign. So, without further ado, let us have a look at what we've got. We have a Lich Priest, and we have Khalida with 3 units of Spearmen, 3 units of Archers, 2 Skeleton Horsemen, 1 Ushabti Greatbow, and some Screaming Skull Catapults. The vast majority of her army is ranged from a lore standpoint, so that's something that we are going to be taking advantage of. Over here we have a military building, a dock, because it's a port city. So we're just going to throw some of our starting funds, because we have the money, into upgrading that and getting ourselves towards Tomb Guard and extra elite infantry capacity so that we can begin to think about taking on some of the heavier hitters around us. That being said, immediately around us are the vampires, the vampire the vampire counts, the Silver Host. And they control the majority of what our first objectives are going to be. They control the capital of this region and the other 2 cities within it. So we're going to be looking to conquer this area, the Crater of the Waking Dead, relatively quickly. However, beyond them are threats that are a little bit more difficult for Tomb Kings to deal with. On the other side of this mountain here, there is another Tomb King faction, but on the right-hand side, there are Skaven, and slightly further down, even though we can't see it, there are Lizardmen. Lizardmen are the ones that I'm most scared of, as their infantry chews through skeletons like it doesn't exist. We can also tell by clicking on Marak here, that there are some green skins close by. They will also chew through our infantry relatively quickly. So those are just a couple of the initial threats that we are going to have to look at. But I think I have talked enough and laid the groundwork for our first fight. So, here we go. Queen Khalida with the Leech Priest Hatmus will be attacking Liesel of the Silver Host. Although it says it'll be a decisive victory, and I've no reason to doubt it, we are going to fight this one. So I'll see you guys. Welcome to the Battle of the Doomglades. On one side, Queen Khalida and her skeletal legions. And on the other, an encroaching force of vampires that shall soon find the sands that they tread upon their new graves. Okay, so how are we going to approach this? We have a lot of range, and that means that we're going to want to do most of our damage before they get anywhere close to us. We also have some Vanguard Horse Archers, so provisionally we'll put them on the front right now. And some artillery and some great bows. Now the great bows aren't quite as long range as the artillery, so we're going to want to put them slightly further forwards. And we're going to want to have our archers relatively close behind our infantry line. Ordinarily I'd put them up front a little bit, but I want to simplify this as much as possible so I can try and get some of those nice cinematic shots that Total War is known for. We're going for a relatively simple deployment. We've got our infantry up front, our ranged behind, and our heroes in between the lines, looking to buff that leadership and get those spells going. Up front we have our cavalry. They're going to look to try and take out the flying units, but also pepper the zombies or the Lord, whatever they can really shoot, and stay away from the dire wolves for as long as possible. Let's see what they have to offer us, shall we? Okay, so they're marching forwards. The catapults are coming in. Oh, a big hit onto that zombie unit there. Very nice. We're going to move our cavalry up to the flanks here, and we're just going to start shooting at the Lord. I'm going to toggle skirmish mode back on, so I don't need to worry about these guys too much. Looks like the Lord is taking some damage. I ordinarily play without skirmish mode, because I don't think it helps very much. And I'm actually just going to quickly turn it off here so that these guys can shoot into the bats again. And we'll keep them moving. They will get caught a little bit, but the reason I turned skirmish mode off is just that If we switch these guys to melee, they should be able to deal with the bats on their own. That shouldn't be an issue. Catapults are firing. I'm going to put the Lich Priest on one side here. And I'm going to begin to focus fire our archers onto the Graveguard, whilst also moving our spear blocks to intercept. Ooh, those Screaming Skull catapults are at risk of doing a decent amount of friendly fire, so I'm going to switch the blob they're aiming for to this group of zombies out here on this side, and I am going to send High Queen Khalida to have a word with Liesel about why you don't invade Tomb King territory. Something that I did want to cover during this battle is, if I bring up the unit tab real quick, you can see that the... Where is it? It's on Khalida, isn't it? Goodness me, I've lost it. We'll talk about it more, but we do have the option to, there we go. Poison attacks on Khalida. I think the skeletons have that as well because they're in Khalida's army, and you can see that indeed they do, because these zombies fighting the cavalry here have it applied. Now, poison doesn't do damage. What it does is it weakens the enemy. And that means that our troops will hold up better in combats that maybe they shouldn't hold up so well in. That's why I wasn't too worried about leaving those cavalry, for instance, to deal with the bats on their own. We are now going to use Khalida's special ability, as highlighted in the teaser trailer, and throw out the Venom Wave, doing quite a bit of damage and sending a lot of zombies flying. However, we are currently under a little bit of threat here, so I'm going to put these archers back on archery mode. They're going to shoot at the Lord. We're going to stop these catapults firing, because I think they're doing more friendly fire than not. And we are going to... Where's the spell? There we go. We're going to use the incantation of Cursed Blades on this spear unit here to make them just a little bit more effective as we attempt to wipe out what remains of the vampires. You can see here that there is a bar stacking up across the top of the screen. This bar is the Realm of Souls. It's a Tomb King army special ability. Each tier offers different things. We aren't going to get to see all of them today because this fight is, well, bluntly put, a little bit too straightforward for that. But what we did see a moment ago is that it replenished hit points, healing injured units before resurrecting. And that means that as we begin to take damage, we begin to sustain. And that is something that we'll come back to time and time again throughout the campaign as we level up our spellcaster. It was a little bit more costly than maybe it needed to be, but I think we showcased what we had in the army. Lots of range, lots of artillery, and a couple of cool spells on our lords. Khalida did 31 gold value because she barely fought anyone, whereas the Great Bows did 623. Yeah, you can see that the vast majority of the value comes from our archer units. The skeletons are very much there as fodder. A change that came in somewhat recently is that the number of kills and damage dealt contributes towards the level your heroes get from battle, which wasn't always the case. It used to be a sort of flat win or loss scenario. This means that the EXP gain can be quite swingy, but at least if we do lose, we'll get some EXP on our lords if we can keep them alive. Here in the post-battle stream, we have the option between Canopic Jars, Army Replenishment, and Endless March. We are going to go for some early Canopic Jars. See if we can make ourselves something of good quality. And there is the confirmation that we did indeed kill an enemy in battle.
Bring me Neferata's head.
Now, does our movement range take us as far
Strike at them.
as this city, the Doom Glade? It does. Well then, with the Lord dead, let's drive out the rest of the chaff and claim the Doom Glade for High Queen Khalida. Considerably less desert on this map, but the enemy has sallied out of the Doom Glades, and we are going to have to take the fight to them. Or rather, we're going to have to irritate them enough to come to us. Ordinarily, if you attack, you would have to go across the battlefield and meet them. But if you have superior range and the ability to damage them from said range, you can force them out over the battlefield to you. And that is what we're going to do. We're going to start with the catapults ready to fire. Their range is a little bit short, but that's okay, because we have the Vanguard deployment mounted horsemen that we are going to use to land a couple of volleys and hopefully bait this army out into the field, where we are going to use Khalida a lot more than we did in the previous fight. In the previous fight, I wanted to point out units and talk about a couple of things. In this one, we're going to be focusing on getting as many levels as possible onto Khalida by getting her into the thick of it nice and early. Let us begin. Okay, over at the front, we can see that the enemy are actually being surprisingly aggressive. The arrows coming over the hill are prompting them to move, which is good. That's what we like. Looks like our archers are switching fire quite a lot, but we're going to tell them to ignore the zombies. And focus their fire on the skeleton warriors. They're not really listening to me, but we are now going to begin pulling them back. And we are going to tell the catapults to begin focusing on the skeleton warriors as well. The dogs are simply too fast, and right now they're shielded by the forest, so they're not going to take a lot of damage. Alright. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to send High Queen Khalida out in front of the rest of the army. We're going to intercept those dogs with spears, and we're going to send the the Lich Priest to deal with that. And here we are just going to put Khalida right in front of the army. Now, this is slightly risky against some forces, but against zombies and skeletons, I actually don't think this is too risky to do. You've got to be aware that there is an element of risk, but, you know, I don't think it's that risky to do. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the enemy to do exactly what they're doing now, which is to group up on Khalida. Partially so that we can get a nice venom wave, but also partially so that the artillery can land its shots into this blob here. And as they come for the surround, pressing tighter, we are going to activate Venom Surge and blast lots and lots of them backwards. Zooming out a moment to take a look at the more macro-oriented view of the battle, we can see that our horse archers have been charged. But that's alright because we can pull them away. And that this big blob on Khalida, despite being on Khalida, is doing next to no damage and is losing the fight. I'm going to send the Ushebti into the fight here so that I can pull our archers out, do my best to keep them as alive and as healthy as possible, while the Cav archers do their job. Ushabti Greatbows are not fantastic combatants, but they will stand there. They will allow the archers to get some free pot shots. And with Khalida and the catapults winning this fight over here, there is the mass crumble and the defeat of the vampire forces. As you can see, some of the units that were taking part in this battle have gained veterancy already. The catapults, the Ushabti Greatbows, things that have been pulling their weight in terms of damage in both battles so far. And we can also see that Khalida got 85 kills, which was the second highest behind the artillery. Hardly surprising, given that the artillery had free reign into a grouped up bunch of zombies. Hopefully, this will have given a decent amount of EXP. It's given 1,300 and an extra level up to Queen Khalida on turn 1. That's what we like to see. We are, of course, going to occupy this settlement and claim the Canopic Jars. And then we are going to take a quick look at the skill trees we have access to. Early on, there isn't a huge amount that's interesting that we can do. However, we are going to pick up Route Marcher so we can get around the map that little bit faster. And we're also going to pick up Passage to the Soul Realm so that we can begin to buff some of our forces with these military-focused skills. So we'll pick up Passage to the Soul Realm. We'll have a quick trip into details to see if we picked up any items, which we didn't. So we don't need to worry about that. And then we're going to head over to the Lich Priest and have a look at what he has to offer as well. And we're going to start moving him down this spell tree here. The reason we're doing this is that we want the Restless Dead. Affected allies in range all. Affects undead. Enabled if leadership is higher than broken and on casting. Basically, this means that every time our Lich Priest casts a spell, we are going to be getting healing on all of our units in range. I don't know if that's quite the whole map or what the range on the spell is. The effect range seems infinite, so I'm going to guess it's the whole map. And that will allow us to sustain our troops in combat alongside the Soul Realm's army passive, which triggers a couple of times with its own healing that we showed earlier. So that's what we're going to do. We're also going to take advantage of this opportunity to pick up some more forces because they don't cost us anything. We don't have to worry about money. And that means that we really want to max out this recruitment as often as possible. Let's just check how long is it going to take. 3 turns? Okay, yes. So we're going to want to pick up an extra swordsman here as well. Swords are a little bit better in melee combat than spears, and we aren't likely to be fighting a huge amount of large monsters with the early vampire counts. 1 or 2 more things to do before we finish the turn is to have a look at what we want to put in the Doom Glade. We could go for the exciting things, build a barracks, get some more units. But to begin with, as is so typical in Total War campaigns, I am going to go for the Mortuary House, because the Mortuary House is going to enable growth. And as we take more of this first province and get more mortuary houses, we are going to speed up the growth of this region, and with it, the speed with which we climb the tech tree. Speaking of tech trees, let's have a quick look at our research. Here we have different dynasties that we can begin to work on. I'm not overly familiar with these dynasties, but I do know that I would like to go for one that focuses on skirmishing and range. So right now the second dynasty is looking good with its reload time reduction and extra ammunition. But the Sepulchral Stalkers are from the third dynasty along with Tomb Scorpions and Carrion, and that sounds like a more high-tech option. However, I think we're going to start with the wisdom of the second dynasty, and move towards improving the archers that we have. If you have any suggestions for future dynasties that we should look at, please do put them in the comments section below, and I'll take a look at that in between episodes. But that's it from me for now. If you enjoyed this episode, please do hit the like button. It helps with the algorithm, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.